We've been told that AI is here to do our chores, it writes our emails, summarizes our meetings, and cleans up our spreadsheets. But while we are busy celebrating the time we have saved, we are ignoring a massive problem: efficiency. Efficiency is not the same as innovation. In fact, there is a growing risk to that by leaning too hard on automation, we are entering a period of creative stagnation, where every brand starts to sound the same, look the same, and solve the same surface level problems. Most companies are using AI as a crutch for the tedious stuff, but they are failing to use it as a catalyst for the big stuff. Our human brains are wired with cognitive biases like functional fixedness that keep us stuck in old ways of thinking. We are faster than ever, but are we any more creative? Or are we just automating our way into a sea of sameness? Today's guest is here to help us pivot. Andy Sitison joined us to discuss how we can move past AI as a mere tool for implementation and start using it to expand the boundaries of the human brain. We are going to deep dive into the neuroscience of associative activations, why CEOs must distinguish novelty from true innovation, and how to keep your company's souls in an despite the algorithmic world. If you have been wondering if AI is making us smarter or just making us lazy, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Thank you, Andy, for making it to the Growth Hacking Culture podcast.
Ivan, it is brilliant. I love, we talked a little bit about what we want to talk about, and I'm so excited. This is going to be a fun conversation. So I'm looking forward to it.
And it's one of my favorite topics because it dives into what is happening in our brain as humans. And I wanted to start with a good question that is going to define the expectations that we have about creativity. So, neurologically, creativity is often seen as kind of a synthesis of disparate ideas, extrapolation of ideas. How does AI's ability to process vast data set mimic or enhances the brain to this associative activation?
I love the question. It is associative, very similar to the brain. And if we go back to the 1940s and the 50s, as programming and computers started to get more and more complex, the designers of the time said, we're going to get to a point where humans can't figure out how to design to deal with the complexity. And they came up with this idea of a neural network, which was essentially a simulation of a neuron. And what is a neuron? It's what manages our nerves in our bodies. And what's great about neurons is it's just a very simple thing. It has an input, output, and it has an action. And then it changes if it's working on my ear or my throat or my fingers, electrical pulses versus muscle reactions, all these things, the neuron adapts itself to solve those problems. And they love that as a design function. And frankly, that's what it does today. So let's jump into what does AI do from just a quick thought exercise here. Picture a map. You can picture Switzerland, Mexico, Peru, America, whatever. Picture a map with all the cities and the roads that connect them. That is the way AI looks. If you were to structurally draw it, it's a bunch of nodes that are interconnected with lines. Now, let's replace those cities and put buckets of water there. And those buckets of water are being dunked in rivers and bays and oceans and whatever. And so we have all these buckets all over the world being filled up with water. And we're identifying what's in each of those buckets. So, we got protozoas, we have maybe some shellfish. It's a big bucket. Anyway, probably not a big bucket. But anyway, we're identifying all those things in that bucket. Now, picture that we have a fish. There's a fish called the menhaden. It's really important to fisheries all over the world. And we don't know what this fish is. We want to figure this fish out. So we feed it into our system and say, tell me what this fish is. Well, now we can go to all the buckets. There's probably not just one bucket, maybe thousands of buckets with menhaden in those buckets that have been identified. So now we know what that fish is, but we also know other fish that look a lot like that fish because we've been looking at fish. So now we have all these other relationships and we have all this associative information between all the geographical locations that these fish exist in. So it enriches that data set by the structure and how we store it and score it. So that is kind of what AI is doing right now. So we train it on a lot of data. It gets really broadly applicable. It has a decent cache of understanding across all its nodes. And so when we feed it something and ask it a question, it processes across that space, writing over that map and looking for the way to answer that question best for you. So it is a lot the way our brains work. It's a neural network concept. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. Where the differences are primarily in its maturity level and also maybe the human connection to the physical world. Like we are way more good at touch and, experience evaluation than these systems are. I'll stop, but that's hopefully that helps a little bit for some of your audience.
I like the similarities, the analogies that you have. It is quite powerful, in fact, because I was visually there. The thing is that the big question for AI is that, as you were saying, so if it is about connecting cities and the possibility for the fish to go around and to learn from experiences, to learn from the stories that has been created in different places that geographically. Now, that would be that if we ask a question to the fish, now let's push the analogy. We ask a question to the fish, he's going to deliver an average of whatever happened in the trips and the connections between the Mexico, Peru,
Mm.
Switzerland, wherever the fish has been traveling, only wherever the fish has been traveling. Maybe humans have the possibility also to imagine places where they haven't traveled. And it
Mm.
might be a difference somehow that we have this possibility that even if we haven't put the foot there, we can feel how it would be, or we can aspire to imagine ourselves in a specific place where we haven't been physically.
Yeah, the synthesis I hate that word. I can never get it out. Synthesis process of bringing that data together, merging that data together is really challenging. We often know that AI fails on context, right? That's always where it struggles. And then you bring up a yet another point is, you know, what about the what ifs, right? Like we know we have these data points pointed out, but what about the others? How do we associate one blue ball to a red ball, right? And I do think you see that AI is able to do that because it has learned that this pier and this pier have water and have fish that, hey, maybe that fish could be there, but it's not really good at it in a lot of scenarios because, we'll say, hey, draw us a picture of a kayak, and all of a sudden there's an outboard stuck on the guy's head. Like, it doesn't know how to properly associate sometimes because it's using math to do that context. And frankly, we're just at a maturity point where it's just not able to emulate us for sure at that level.
Andy, you made me think also about a story like a dream that can become a nightmare for,
Mm,
especially for me, when I hear the stories about Neuralink. We know exactly, so the AI is a representation of our neurons network inside of our brain, and basically we are talking about electrical signals, some chemicals communicating between the neurons, and having the option to connect directly AI to our brain is quite scary, especially because we humans have grit, and we want to take advantage of a lot of things. Imagine the option of being inside of your soul, having all your fears or all the things that we don't demonstrate in an easy way to others that can be accessible. It is a weapon of mass destruction. This time I'm using the
there's
word
two things you're talking
weaponization.
about here. It is extremely scary, and you think let's it, to implant, and yes, neural. Wait a second, I had a network jump there. Um, putting neural network as a design does absolutely make it more easily applicable to, starting to do mind control as we are jumping at. And existentially, it gets really kind of scary to do the what ifs against that. But let's bring it back a little bit and talk about like digital twins, which is this idea that I can build a digital version of me and maybe test, my genetic makeup and my, medical drugs on me and make sure I don't kill myself when I try to fix something. Well, that sounds really cool At the same time, I have no trust in anyone right now. I have no desire for anyone to, I mean, I talk to somebody on a business call and 2 hours later is a YouTube video running about the topic we talked about. And like, I have no trust in the digital systems and the companies doing it today. I don't want them to build a digital twin. I will stop them to do that if I can. And so going further, it just gets scarier. And so I come back and say, what do we have to fix this now. We have to start establishing human agency and as humans understand how technology can work with us. Otherwise, it does start to, we can't just use a profit motive to drive tech development, right? And, I go back to 2012. We were helping banks in a big tech company I was working for, make trades at 130,000 trades a second. I think it was actually more like 130 million trades a second. It was a massive number. Once you're doing trades at that level, you can't control that. You can't regulate that, right? You have to have technologies that manage technologies. And if we're doing that kind of work and we're heading that way with some of this AI technology, as we know, we as humans have to start to set some human level structures to manage that. And frankly, we don't have a lot in place right now.
Totally true. When we try to understand let's try to understand a little bit more what is really human and awesome and what is AI that what AI can mime, or sometimes in fact it happens that we believe that what we take as creativity is not really creativity and AI can mime it quite easily. So sometimes we put humans too high in the hierarchy, saying we are unique because of that. But in fact, when now with the development of AI, we see that even the biases that we have as humans can be easily replicated with AI, and we blame AI or we blame the creators behind AI, and we don't realize how biased we could be. And I want to understand a little bit more this differentiation between creativity and innovation. We often use these terms interchangeably. So for a CEO, how should they distinguish between AI generated novelty and AI driven innovation?
It's a great question because right now we have two letters, two small letters, A and I, and they represent everything, right? Like we've converted everything to a buzz term that is two letters. And it is not that. And matter of fact, I would tell you that, well, first off, I mentioned the technology's been around since 1940. And if you look at what people call AI today, I would tell you 60% or more is actually capitalism they're talking about, not AI. It's the application of technology, of resources for profit, right? So what comes into play is all the classic structures of capitalism, like hey, get to the beach first, win the install base. So you see the big bubble, like we had. If you're old enough like me to remember the .com, we had this crazy window where we had everybody starting an e-commerce site, and there was one called socks.com. It had a great Super Bowl commercial, and then we blew up like a week later. Like it was it's the market blew up a week later. So we're in a bubble, a scary bubble, because this is more investment than anybody's ever done in a bubble before. But AI is in that moment where we're driving the technology and the business application of into absolutely everything. And frankly, I think it's about at least 50% over the top. I don't want AI in most of those things. So that's not innovation. That's not even creativity in my view. It's opportunity. It's opportunistically exploitative of what they might can get done. And I frankly think, I'd give it a pretty bad grade at the moment, and for where that takes some of these businesses. With that said, innovation, AI is brilliant. It is, as a technology, a brilliant tool. I give you what we do with it. We do story analysis to understand communities. So let's say I collect 500 stories. And then I go over to some really brilliant researchers and I hand those researchers 500 stories and say, read those. Well, okay, 4 days later, they're almost done reading all these stories. They're not going to remember much. They're barely going to be able to pull down the thematics, trends, and threads that run through this. They're going to have a hard time understanding improvement. They'll come up with something because humans are always sure they got it right, right? Just like AI. But they're not going to understand that humans don't do that well. So what AI is great at is having that deep cache, that broad associative relationship that I can feed that data to it. And everybody thinks generative AI, but what we use AI for is called sequential classification, which is I take a story and I say, go in this story and find evidence of whatever I'm looking for. And I do emotives like joy, anxiety, activity level, self-transcendence. I study things that are more the thoughts, needs, and kind of feelings of the people that are writing these experiences out. So I look for all those things and I go bing, 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 and I track all that scoring. And then I can feed that in and say, okay, find the covariance. Where is this data flowing together? Find the variance. Look at principal component analysis and look at which features matter the most. I can do all this scientific work and start to see all these sand piles like histograms showing up of all the things that matter. Then I can hand that to the researchers and say, researchers, validate this. And oh, by the way, on all those sand piles, I can say, give me quotes that actually prove what you're telling me is true in those 500 stories. So boom, here's 10 quotes that just nail it, right? From a marketing or a quality standpoint. Hand all that to the researchers and say, validate all this, prove that this is right. They found these cool things for you, the needles in the haystack. Validate these needles are right. That is innovation. That is in changing our business. We're doing it at a better level than we could ever done it. We're doing it at 10x, if not 20, 40x the pace we could used to do it at. And it's having similar effects on our programming skill set for our web apps and so forth. So, innovation, AI is a great tool, but don't you understand when you're playing in capitalism versus AI and then consider, what your rheostat is for how much of that is exploiting and trying to win a market versus trying to change a business process or a product and know what you're doing. I mean, I can't affect your intent, but know at least where you are in the process.
In the last year, there has been so much investment by companies building proof of concepts of AI. There is many companies, including the bad guys of McKinsey, Bain, who have been implemented millions and millions of dollars of AI tools as a proof of concept that have a short lifespan.
Mm.
It has been, but the real question that I ask myself is it that you use the word I give bad grades. Do we give bad grades to the AI tool? Do we give bad grades to the decision makers, the users, the one who took the decision to create a stupid uh, proof of concept? Maybe, as you said, as you used the word capitalism, because of being more efficient. We can call it more efficient. It sounds better than using the word capitalism.
Yeah.
Whose fault is here? Is it bad AI or bad decision making by humans?
Yeah, I think the inflection point in that space is application of, right? It's everything like intent and training, expertise, thoughtfulness, ethics. You play all those tools in. And by the way, we've been making bad business decisions for since we started making business, right? Like for decades, we've made bad technical decisions. We've done the same thing, but AI has been a couple things. One, it's been bigger, and because of the centralization and where we are in technology, its spans is so big. And frankly, it was loved. It was one of those things that we didn't have to explain to people. Once people started playing with generative AI, they got it. Executives got it, teachers got it. People were like, "Oh, I can see how this is useful to me."
Hmm.
Rare that kind of adoption happens. So we had this flood, and so we're dealing with that flood at the moment. And I think it's about application. It's understanding. I'll flip it for a second and say, you know what? If you're a company, you're executive, and you want to get AI in your business, it's if you were to go out and hand everybody magic markers in your business and say, okay, go do something with them. You get some real good art from maybe 2% of your population. You get some graffiti in your bathrooms now, and you probably get a lot of markers that never got opened. And because you can't just give it to them, you have to apply it. You have to build competencies to make it happen. You have to have them understand how it's valuable, and you can apply that same thinking to the market. I get it. Everybody wants to be in the space. Everybody's afraid if they don't have the AI in their products, they're going to be obsolete. But I would tell you, a quicker path to obsolescence is poor design products, right? It's hard to say because we got a lot of poor design products out there right now. But you know, it is important to consider why you're doing it and execute well. And I hope good companies will apply it in nice ways, and we will see kind of a sloughing off of a lot of the silliness that we're dealing with now. I mean, we're as a consumer base, we are absolutely sick of it. I mean, if you go into social and there's a picture of uh, a grizzly bear on a rocket ship with a cowboy. I don't need to see ever another one of those pictures, right? Like there's so much junk. At the same time, art, AI will be a big part of art. You mentioned art a second ago, and I think this is important because everybody's like AI slop. I hate AI. It's ruining the artist industry. And I would tell you, it's just the next step. The metronome was the first thing to steal a job in the art business. A rhythm section, a drum machine allowed a guitarist to make a song without hiring a drummer. And so the drummer lost a little business, but we have more guitar songs because of it. Like you think about hip hop and sampling, there's all sorts of reuse in that work and CGI in great movies. These are all art functions. So we have the craft. The craft is the skill of making something, and then you have the art, which is the commentary of art. And so I think AI will be absolutely instrumental, possibly more so than a lot of other media over the years, in good art going forward and in good craft. And it will also, unfortunately, we'll still have a fair amount of slop in the mix there, but don't write it off as a monolith. AI is not a monolith in any of these topics. It's just a new thing we're having to learn how to do. And the application is the place where we're failing when we fail.
Hmm. I like the example that you picked about art because it is where, in fact, this capitalism making money at the same time expanding the human potential or creativeness are working hand by hand. It's almost like you have added a doses of purpose to the making money part. And this
Mm.
is good. Good, but there needs to be a purpose that brings something positive for humans with this, regardless of the transaction that there is in the middle. If it allows us to express better who we are, you made me think about one of my friends who's a painter, and I have told him try to use AI to expand what you do because the directions that you have already taken, the expressions that you have, it can be used like in multiple ways, and that could be a good application. Now, we as humans, sometimes we get stuck and we suffer from this functional fixedness, seeing an object only for its traditional use. And it is very difficult to get out of this circle, especially when you are in corporate and you have to follow too many rules. You really love being, it's a way of protecting yourself to follow the traditional rules. How can AI help employees break these cognitive biases to find non-obvious solutions? But
Yeah,
real
oh, go ahead. Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic for sure. And I'm trying to decide how to cover it because you could go at it a few different ways because it's really interesting. It is true. Humans are probably possibly as bad or worse than AI at function-based thinking, right? Traditional thinking. And I'm the most orthogonal person I've ever met. So I'm the opposite of that. The stream of ideas flies through inside my brain. I just pluck a few now and then. And so I live a different world than that. The great thing about AI is, for example, we do story analysis, like I said, and I'm fit feed scores and demographics and stories, and I lock down generative just on what we do, our stories. And I'll ask it a bunch of questions. What are the improvement process? What do you see? What do you? And then at the end of the process, I'll say, you know what? I've asked you a lot of questions, but in the data, based on the concentrations and such, what was really important to my authors that I didn't think to ask you about? And surprisingly, every time it gives me five or six profound things, little interconnections that I didn't see that I can bring forward and go, oh, there's something I missed. It just makes me a little better. And I think that's a nice perspective. I would tell people that one of the most important skill sets, besides good grammar or good communication skills in textual communication skills, is creativity. because if you don't think to ask it, you won't. Like I did a demo where I turned generative AI into a pirate, and I forced it to only use 17th century content about pirates to answer any questions. That's silly. But you had to think about that. You had to think about making it a pirate. You had to think about forcing it to only talk about pirate stories. And so that's what our opportunity is now. We are finding new levels of productivity that are crazy. We're really improving what we can do and get out of a human's 8-hour day, for example. But you now have to use your brain beyond the classic, I'm going to be on 8 hours of phone conference calls and check boxes and do my calendars and stuff. We need people to be more creative in this newer world. We need people to think about other people, and we need to think about the context of things and ask what ifs. There's some scary, the guardrails are not on there right now. So all those things we've been talking about are best processed by humans, considering that and thinking about what's next. And I'll end with, I think one of the things that's kind of sad about AI is that it's a moderator. It drives you to the middle. It's it is based. It's like going in a library and a person that's read all the books in the library and asking them a question. They're going to always answer that question primarily with what they read, right? And that's the way AI works. And so if you want new ideas, other than possible association across platform, local minimums and so forth, that you don't get that from that model. That's what the humans will still do for us in the process. And things, these are all just current moments. Things are expanding and changing, but humans still matter, and I think they will continue to matter.
I remember that I have spent a lot of times having discussions with my bot, uh, my AI bot. And the most powerful discussions that I have got, it is not about how do you help me to automate a given task, but more about telling him, this is what I do in a day or in a week.
Mm.
Is there a way to that I can spend more time with my family because I'm spending currently X number of hours during the week, and I need to spend with my 15 years old at least 1 hour to be present, because that's the reason why I became an entrepreneur, because I wanted to have the freedom to be with my family, that my wife gets bored with me and that my daughter starts hating me after 15. The typical human path. And it was wonderful, the type of discussions, because we learn from others. So AI brings you in a succinct, a structured way the knowledge, the human knowledge that he has learned from someone else, and that allows me to take then decisions and to add a layer of creativity to adapt it to my context. And that's where I find more value than any automation that I have asked AI to do for me,
Yeah.
to brainstorm my ideas or to help me judge myself. I'm doing things in this way. Is there another way to do it that is better? I love
It is a great companion in that way, and I think the people that are really good with AI and generative AI are treating it that way. I call my partner at the Share More Stories a GPT whisperer, because he's just so good at talking to. It's almost like a relationship. Like he can manage that thing and get more out of it than anybody. And he's an English major. He just knows how to communicate with narrative. And I'm the opposite. I'm TLDR. Like I struggle. I have to rethink my prompts because I don't like typing that much. So, and so it's an interesting moment, right? We're getting a new opportunity, and I think sometimes just great change also helps people find new versions of themselves. But calendaring is a great point, and I'll won't keep hooking on this, but your calendaring idea, that there's some new tools coming out that I think are amazing. Like there's certain people that are just killing themselves. And I did in my earlier years, and my kids are all graduated now. So, but at the same time, there's a real problem right now. There's a real deep desire for authentic connection, trust, and understanding of us as a population. And I don't know the companies, you talk about applying this stuff and really innovating. I think companies need to consider those type things. How do we connect with the humans again so that there is trust? Because I think the best profit motive right now is trust. If you can
Mm,
prove trust, you can sell a ton of stuff right now because everybody doesn't trust anything, and everybody would love to trust something. We're all hungry for it. So to your point, we'd all need the productivity, but also to continue to be a productivity tool for us, you need to allow us to trust you. And maybe we need to start paying for it. Maybe we can't be the product anymore. Maybe ad revenue isn't the right way to drive monetization of all the technology we're using because look where it's taken us. My Google search leads me to nothing but profit motive, right? I don't get
mm.
anything I wanted to search on. I get rent a house for the weekend. I get, and so we're a little lost in that, right? We're a little caught and slightly exhausted from that effort. Yeah, I could keep talking. I'm just going to stop myself.
Andy, but you have highlighted a big challenge that is happening today, not only in the world, but also inside in the workplace. This
Mm,
idea of trust. Today, I think that if there was an index like the volatility index that we see in the VIX in the stock exchange, our level of trust is very low today. We don't trust the authorities. We don't trust anymore the judgment, the justice. We don't trust our leaders inside of companies. I see it everywhere because the fact that I am working in work culture, I get to see some indexes of trust, and they are usually maybe the driver why employees get unmotivated. They with high levels of absenteeism. And you cannot change anything if you don't work in this essential point that make us human. How can I see someone and say, he's my man, I trust him, I can feel it, until he proves me the opposite, at least. But today we are living in a world where everybody is trying to not just towards a direction that is going to bring profits instead of connection.
And we've lost a lot of our we've been pro business and I am a capitalist, right? I get that. I've been fighting for money all my life, and at the same time we've kind of killed a lot of our civic structures. We've got a lot of data center issues going on the East Coast here where they're trying to build, multi football field size data centers to hook to Europe.
Mhm.
And but our local laws treat a 100,000 square foot building the same as a 1,200 square foot building, and you have the same access to water. You can't refuse them electrical connection. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the rule right now. So you start to look at family structures and look at civic structures and economic structures, and you realize we've probably gone a little far at making anything go. And thus we're all struggling with that, and it's part of the trust problem. To fix this, we have to change our intents, and I think it's really easy to do business today. We don't have to pour molten lead into a crucible and then put it on a horse-drawn wagon, right? We make money very easily as corporations at this point. So make money in good reasons and start to consider your intent and consider your constituency. I think it pays off. I think it not only is the right thing for us to do and allows us to start to think about these structures, but it also makes you a great company that everybody wants to hook up with. So, you know, we're going to see that switch. I'm absolutely sure the pendulum swing is happening. We're hitting the brick wall on the one side, and we're about to swing back on this because it literally just can't get any more like this. To your point, everybody is, we don't even trust our eyes anymore because we get on social and 20% of it's fake, and 20% is people telling you that you shouldn't believe what you see for your eyes, which is real. And so it just can't go like this. We have to come back off of that.
Hmm. Now, I was wondering if today AI is helping us to do everything that we hate, the tedious implementation, the crunching numbers, producing some text that looks a little bit like us. Um, does the human brain actually become more creative, or do we risk this cognitive atrophy where we lose the ability to think deeply, just because somebody's doing it for us. It made me think a little bit about something that I read that, for instance, that the wiring of the connections in the brain of, for instance, a taxi driver in London is much more developed than people who are like me using Google Maps for everything, even from the village in the 5 kilometers from here. Uh, what is your take on this
Yeah.
laziness that can happen to our brain?
Well, it's interesting, and you didn't ask, but I'll give you 2 seconds on this. I was a left-handed, right-brain musician, and decided to get my master's in technical field. So I had to take all the math and all the programming. My wife was at IBM, and I thought, hey, that looks like a fun. I'll go do that. And so I taught my left brain to work equally to my right brain, and actually picked up a stutter for about 6 months because I was refiring all my synaptic connections up there. And so I work off both sides of my brains. And never been tested, but I'm pretty sure I use it at a more whole brain than most people. And so it's an interesting conversation to me, and I've thought about this a lot. Um, I, I think this makes us more creative. I think the tool, anytime in the past when we have taken tediousness away from our workers, and let's be honest, a lot of what we call the labor force today, the workforce today, is still based off Victorian principles, which was, our 40 hour, which was not a 40-hour work week, but we show up at work, we get our work done, we might get some compensation, we might, have a lunch break. All these things were coming off times of the early industrial age, and we're constantly evolving it. And I think this is yet the next evolution of that. When we free up people, they naturally will become more creative. Their time can be applied to, I think, higher value activity. But also, I think it's going to become the needed commodity in labor as the tools start to automate. We've been automating it with algorithms before AI, and so this has been going on for well into a decade, probably about 22 decades, and um, we're seeing that already. We're seeing that jobs be, the value added jobs become those that think and help connect and divide and organize and strategize. And so creativity is a key part of that. I think we all want more creativity. We might get to a point where we're all too creative. That's another conversation altogether. But also at the moment, don't get so happy with the little companion of taking all the tedious work that you don't check it, because just like someone said, it's like a new hire or a college intern. Like they really want to please, and AI really wants to please you, and they love to be definitive. And so here's the right answer, right answer, right answer, right answer. Oh, this one's wrong. Wait, this one's wrong. Wait, we got three wrongs in a row. You can't trust it yet. It can help you evolve thinking, enable you to go faster, but then also put in those validation checks. Otherwise, you are going to get caught in something.
By the way, last week in the radio, while I was driving, somebody was mentioning that uh, AI reacts better to your prompts if you are a little bit mean to AI. So go for it. You have done it completely wrong. You have to treat AI bad in order to react and do more better work.
It
It
is it
was
is
funny.
the most human interface we've ever had. And I will shamefully admit, I yell and I'm ugly to my AI a lot of times. And partly because of that, I capitalize, I yell, I exclamation mark, don't ever do this again. And because I want it to know I mean it. And I do believe it interprets the tone of our text. So I do treat it like I treat it poorly like a human, but I treat it like a human. And so yeah, I'm in that camp. I agree. We don't all know exactly what this stuff's doing, but I definitely think it matters in some situations.
Talking about innovation, so when you ask many people what is the most innovative brand, despite the fact that it happened almost 20 years ago, everybody would say Apple, and they will
Hmm.
mention Steve Jobs and all the stuff. And I was wondering, how can AI help any company just by looking at customer data to find the problems customers don't even know they have yet? Because for me, the innovation in Apple came from the angle that they took, that we didn't know that we wanted this is the we had this specific need, but we went crazy for it, and our ego status and whatever it came with all these Apple products made us crazy. what is your take? Is it possible to that AI reaches, or is it now possible that throw some customer data and we find the problems that the customers don't have?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you're bringing up that are really interesting. If you look at the trends of buzz that we've had innovation since, say, 1990 to now, we had these waves of really interesting, powerful things. And I feel like we've been kind of devoid of that. I feel like the art world has gotten a little weak in the last 10 years. And I don't think we've had anything really interesting to take us over, except AI is obviously the big next thing. And in part, it's that we have mature systems that are evaluating us. We've been on social for quite a while, and those algorithms are evaluating us and understand and determining what they think we are. And I will tell you, I did one time. I pulled all the data off my social, and I spent like I don't know, stupid number like 30 hours evaluating it because I wanted to consider how well it knew me. It was horrible. It didn't know me at all. It knew some of my actions. It assumed so much about me and was completely wrong. And I would say it got it wrong almost worse than a coin flip. It was sad, and annoying all at the same time. And I think that's the problem. I'm not saying that surveys don't work and that all our net promoter score work is not worth something. It is. But like that's why we started at what we do. And that is instead of asking a survey question, which you can get an answer to your question, but should you have asked that question in the first place? And what we do is dull it down and we go to that community and we ask a person, tell me about your experience. Tell me what you feel, think, and need, and tell me in 500 words. And we take that back. And all of a sudden, guess what? They just told, out of 20 people, three of them told us something we hadn't even thought about before. And now we start to realize how powerful, you read a story about somebody whose mother died in their arms, and in part that was part of a corporate problem or an insurance problem. And you go, I can't ever be the same. We sit down with our customers and we tell them we're going to collect stories. And then 3 weeks in, we start showing them stories. They're like, oh my God, these are stories. And we're like, yeah, that's what we said we're going to give you, like, and people are blown away when they actually connect with people. And so I would tell you AI is we're using AI to make that happen, right? And to help create that analysis. So AI is a great tool for connection. And if your intent's right and your application's right, it can be very powerful. It's a master. It's also a student. And so again, back to the magic word of our conversations, application, right? Like the moment we're in and how to apply this stuff. But yeah, I absolutely think it's going to be important to that evolution.
What is quite crazy, Andy, is that there is still many companies selling us surveys that have
Mhm.
been drafted maybe 30 years ago with the same content. And as you said, there is not the richness of somebody telling you with context, emotions, a storyline to help you identify better what they cannot realize. Maybe inside of the story, somewhere hidden, there is something, a feature that you want to communicate better or reshape your products. And it cannot be done from 1 to 10. Are you going to recommend us to your neighbor? That it is impossible. But I see the same pattern, not only for customer experience, but employee surveys. My
Yep.
God,
Same thing.
enough, because on top, half of the employees are replying bullshit because after 20 questions you start answering bullshit instead of that there is only a few questions, but
And
with
does your manager really know it's you or not, right? Like, is it really anonymous? I don't know.
exactly, everybody's scared. I know sometimes it was anonymous because it was completely a well-reputed company and all the stuff. But yeah, most of the people that I was working with, they were claiming that it may not be anonymous. Anyways, so what I like about that, what you're saying here is we can use AI to draft the analysis of everything that inside of stories. There is not only metadata that help us identify context, but there is also solutions. It's almost like crowdsourcing solutions for the problems that we have. It's like extending your employee reach because people are providing you with options, and that is beautiful. And real innovation is through the understanding of through the humans entering into the stories of others. And I'm pretty sure that this
Mhm.
Steve Jobs, crazy as he was, I think that he had the ability to put himself on the other side as a customer to come up with directions of where he wanted to go. That is beautiful, right?
Mhm.
um, what is, according to you, the one thing a human brain does during the creative process that an LLM or neural network might never replicate?
Mm.
What is our uniqueness?
Yeah, I think well, it's at the current moment, definitely the human brain is better at context for sure. But I think that gets past. I think the one thing it's going to struggle the most with is going to be, and I hinted at it earlier, it's our really a brilliant ability to transfer experience to our brains. So everything from touching these glasses in my hand to hearing a voice to remembering a memory of my childhood to a conversation with my mom or eating a sandwich. We have such a brilliant skill set in our bodies to do that, and then to turn that into electrical currents, which is essentially math, right? Yeah, it's a similar function of math that like today, you want to share a smell with your friend in New Jersey. How you share a smell? You can't. There was a thing called, there was a guy that created a smell printer, and it was like had certain pheromones in the printer, and you could share a smell with a printer. This is like in the 90s. It never came off the ground, but we still can't share a smell. And so you watch a video. Can you imagine if you could smell half of those videos? Like, oh my gosh. So there's things that we just inherently can do now that technology is still very far from doing. So I think I would hang on that is that last mile of human experience is huge and not transferable yet. And again, why experience matters, right? Why we need to be leveraging that from the human side of the equation.
I love that last mile of human experience. But still, I would never connect myself to Neuralink. So, Elon, you will not have my brain.
Yeah, but your grandkids might. That's the fear,
That's the that's the problem.
yeah.
Andy, um, I understand that you have been working in this area, in this field of linking technology to human behavior, to the understanding of the mindset in order to craft powerful stories of either customers, employees, translating this uh, making it easy for people to drive value out of this collection of data that I remember 20 years ago that everybody was starting collecting data without
Mm.
understanding how to extract value out of that insight. It doesn't mean we have 35% of Hispanic people in this company. Wow, that's not an insight. What do we do about it? And what you are doing is to create context behind. So giving a full story. Tell me, if somebody wants to reach you out to ask you more questions about how you do it, to benefit from your wisdom. By the way, excellent conversation. I loved it. I feel like I have been talking to you for hours and hours, and yeah,
It's been a good one. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the same as your bot told you. I know you. No, I felt connected. That is the
Yeah.
truth. How can people reach you out? What is the easiest way?
Yeah, I'm sure my last name will show up here. There's very few of citizens out there, so you can find me that way. I do. We share more stories as the company. You can find us on LinkedIn or on the web, and that's where we're doing this fun experiment of rehumanizing technology and digital. And I am also a crazy kayaker, and I do a lot of nonprofits around improving the waterways where in the state that I live. So you might also trip over a bunch of interesting projects around that. So if any of those things are interesting to you, find me and let's talk because I'm all about connecting.
That is good. I'm going to be putting the links to share more stories and your LinkedIn profile so that people gets to talk to you. And it has been awesome really to have this
You
conversation
too,
with you.
man.
Thank you
I've
very
really
much.
enjoyed it.
Thank you.